The night the news reached the palace that her son, the king, was dead, the old queen did not weep. She stood by the window with the lamps guttering behind her and began to count the children who stood between her and the throne. The messenger had come in from the road with the dust still on his feet, and he said the words the way a man says a thing he is afraid to carry. The king is dead, and the room went still around those words, the way a room goes still when everyone in it is waiting to see which way the powerful one will turn. Nobody spoke her name out loud. You did not speak her name out loud, not in that house, not that night. You kept your eyes low, and you watched her back at the window, and you prayed, in a small way servants pray, that she would grieve like a mother grieves. Slow down here. This part matters, because everything that comes after turns on what she did in that first quiet minute, when the lamps popped and the night pressed on the glass, and a whole kingdom held its breath behind one old woman who would not cry. She did not grieve like a mother. Come sit close now, and let me tell it the way it happened. She stood there, and she counted her own grandchildren, the little ones who called her by the name grandmothers are called, the ones too small yet to walk. Every child of the royal line was a hand reaching toward the crown she wanted on her own head. So every child became a number, and every number became a name to be crossed out. I have told this story many times, and I still go quiet right here. A grandmother counting the babies of her own blood, working out how many of them would have to die. That is the cold at the center of this whole thing. That is where we begin. But here is what she did not count. While the order was still being spoken up in the high rooms, down a back hall, a nurse was already running. Sandals slapping the cold stone. A small one held tight against her chest. So small he made no sound. She ran past the reach of the queen toward a door only a few people in the world knew how to open. I believe some of the oldest, truest stories in the book turn on one person running in the dark while the powerful count their winnings. Hold that picture. One woman, one child, 6 years of silence about to begin, and a queen who was certain she had counted everyone and had not. To understand what she did that night, you have to know the house she came out of. Her name was Athaliah, and she was not born in Jerusalem. She was born in the north, in the royal house of Israel, and the blood in her veins was the blood of 2 names. The book does not say gently. Her father was Ahab, the king the old writers called the worst that ever sat over Israel. Her mother, most of the tradition tells us, was Jezebel, the queen who fed the prophets of Baal at her own table and hunted the prophets of the Lord like animals. That was the kitchen this woman grew up in. That was the porch she was raised on. Think about what that means. A child learns the world at the knee of the people who feed her. Athaliah learned it at the knee of a woman who killed prophets and burned incense to a storm god of wood and stone. Baal, they called him, a god you fed with fear and sometimes with blood. She did not stumble into cruelty late in life. She was handed it as an inheritance, the way my grandmother handed me a hymn, the way a father hands a son a trade. The way I heard it, that is the terrible thing about her. She was doing what she was taught. Now the book puts her marriage on the record without flinching. 2 Kings, chapter 8, verse 18, tells us that the king of Judah walked in the way of the kings of Israel, as did the house of Ahab, for the daughter of Ahab was his wife. There it is, the daughter of Ahab. She left the north and she came south, and she did not come empty-handed. She carried the whole north down into the south with her. She carried Baal into the city of David. She carried her mother's table into the house that was supposed to belong to the Lord. I have to stop here a second, because this is the part I used to tell too fast. For years I'd say, and she married into Judah, and move right along, like it was just politics, just two kingdoms shaking hands. Took me getting old, sitting out in my workshop back of the house with the cedar dust on my hands, to slow down and feel what it cost. My grandmother told Bible stories on the porch in Georgia on Saturday nights, and she never rushed a marriage in a story. She'd say a marriage is two rivers meeting. You best know what's upstream. I believe she was right, because upstream of this one was Jezebel, and that water was about to run all through the house of David. So, how does it happen? How does a king in the line of David, the line God had promised to keep, end up taking a bride out of the house of Ahab? It happened the way most disasters happen, slowly, and for reasons that looked wise at the time. Judah in the south and Israel in the north had spent years at each other's throats. A marriage between the houses looked like peace. It looked like strategy. Jehoram of Judah took Athaliah to wife, and two crowns leaned toward each other, and everybody at the wedding, I imagine, thought they were being sensible. But some poisons work slow. That is the thing nobody at the wedding could see. You do not marry a kingdom's gods out of your house just because you signed a treaty. Athaliah came, and her ways came with her, and her son grew up breathing that air. A generation is a long time to let a thing settle into the walls. By the time the danger was plain, it was not a treaty anymore. It was a bloodline. It was a woman standing very close to the throne of David, with the instincts of Jezebel, and none of the fear of God that might have held her back. Now picture the place where all this was going to break open. Picture Jerusalem, not a small thing. A city set up on its hills, the morning sun coming over the walls, the streets waking up below, and up on the high ground, two houses standing near each other. The palace, where kings lived and schemed, and the temple, the house of the Lord, with its courts and its bronze and its inner rooms where the priests moved in the half-dark. Those two houses, the palace and the temple, are the whole stage of this story. Hold them both in your eye, because the queen would rule from one of them, and the thing she was hunting was hidden in the other. And here is what was quietly at stake, the thing the whole story is really about. God had made a promise to David that his lamp would not go out, that there would always be a son of his line to sit on the throne in Jerusalem. A lamp. That is the picture the old writers used. One small flame meant to be passed hand to hand down the years, never allowed to go dark. I believe you cannot feel the weight of this story until you feel the weight of that lamp. Because in a few short pages, a woman raised in the house of Baal was going to try to blow it out for good. And for 6 long years, it would come down to one flame, hidden in the dark, in the last place she would think to look. Her son's name was Ahaziah, and he became king of Judah, and he did not reign long. The book tells you why in a way that lands hard if you slow down and hear it. 2 Chronicles chapter 22 says he was 42 years old. Some readings put him younger, when he began to reign, and he reigned 1 year in Jerusalem. 1 year. And then it says the thing that explains the whole man. His mother was his counselor to do wickedly. His mother. It goes on, he walked in the ways of the house of Ahab, for his mother was his counselor. She did not just raise him. She advised him. She stood at his shoulder while he ruled, and she poured her father's ways into his ear. I have known men like that, ruined not by strangers, but by the voice closest to them. That is the quiet tragedy under this king. He had the throne of David under him, and Jezebel's daughter whispering in his ear, and he listened to the whisper. The writer of Chronicles does not hate him so much as pity him. He was a young man with a bad counselor, and the counselor was his own mother, and a bad counselor you love is the hardest kind to walk away from. The way I heard it told, Ahaziah never really had a chance to be his own man. He was his mother's project from the start. And then came Jehu. Up in the north, God had raised a hard man to tear down the whole house of Ahab, root and branch, and Jehu came through the land like a storm off the sea. Ahaziah of Judah was in the wrong place at the wrong time, kin to the house that was being torn down, standing too close to the fire. In the days of Jehu's judgment, the king of Judah was struck down and killed. 1 year on the throne, and it was over. The young king was dead, and up in the palace, his mother heard the news. Now go back with me to that first scene, but stand closer this time. The messenger comes in from the road again, dust on his feet, and he carries the same kind of words he always carries. The words nobody wants to say. Your son is dead, the king is dead. And a mother, any mother, hearing that, you know what should happen. The world should stop. The knees should give. There should be a sound in the room that you never forget hearing. But there was no sound. That is the thing that makes my skin go cold every time. The grief did not come. The messenger said his piece, and the queen stood there, and the room got quiet, and the quiet stretched out, and still it did not come. No cry, no collapse, just an old woman doing arithmetic behind her eyes. I want you to feel how wrong that is. A house full of people braced for a mother's scream, and instead they got silence, and in that silence, something colder than grief was already moving, because grief was not what rose up in her. Something else was. 2 Kings chapter 11 verse 1 tells it in one dreadful sentence. And when Athaliah, the mother of Ahaziah, saw that her son was dead, she arose. She arose, not she wept, she arose. She saw that her son was dead, and the first thing the book records her doing is standing up. And you have to understand what standing up meant for a woman like her in that moment. Her son, the king, was gone, and with him gone, for the first time in her whole life, there was no man standing above her. No father, no husband, no son, nobody between her and the throne itself. Sit with that a second, because I think this is the hinge the whole story swings on. Here was a woman who had tasted power her entire life, the daughter of a king, the wife of a king, the mother of a king, the counselor behind a throne, always near it, never on it, always the voice in somebody else's ear. And now, in the space of one messenger's sentence, the last man between her and the crown was in the ground. Between you and me, I don't think the throne was a new hunger for her that night. I think it was an old hunger that finally saw an open door. And so she did her arithmetic. If she was going to take the throne and hold it, she could not leave the sons of the royal line alive to grow up and come asking for what was theirs. The grandchildren, the heirs of David's promise. Every one of them was a claim against her, a reason for the people to rise up one day and pull her down. So she counted them the way you count a debt, and she made up her mind to erase them. What she was about to do had no precedent in Judah. Kings had killed rivals before. Blood had been spilled for thrones since thrones existed. But this, a grandmother setting out to murder the whole line of David, her own descendants, to seat herself alone on the throne of God's promise. Nobody in Jerusalem had ever seen the like. I believe that is why the old writers slowed down to name her when they usually rushed right past the women. They wanted you to remember. Something was coming that the city of David had never survived before, and the only thing standing against it was a promise, a lamp, and a nurse who was already running. So the order went out. 2 Kings chapter 11 verse 1 does not spare us and does not linger either. She arose and destroyed all the seed royal. 6 words. Destroyed all the seed royal. The whole line of the house of David, the heirs of the promise, marked for death by the command of one woman. I am not going to dress this up for you, and I am not going to drag you through the worst of it either. Some things you tell plain, out of respect for the ones they happen to. The book itself tells it plain. It does not give the queen a speech. It does not give us the sound of it. It just says the seed royal was destroyed and lets the silence after do the work. I have to be honest with you about how hard this one is to tell. I used to skip lightly over verse 1, the way you step quick across a hot stretch of pavement. Say it fast, get to the rescue, get to the good part. But my grandmother never let a hard verse go by fast, and I have come around to her way. Because if you rush past the killing, you rob the rescue of its weight. You cannot feel how much that one hidden child mattered unless you first sit, just for a breath, with how many did not make it. So we will not celebrate this. We will not make it a show. We will just tell it true and honor the small ones the book does not name. Understand who these children were. This is the part that turns my stomach every time, and I think it is meant to. These were not her enemies. These were not soldiers from another army. These were her grandchildren, her son's children, little ones who, some of them, had surely sat on her knee, who knew her face, who called her by the name the young call their grandmother. And she looked at those same small faces, and she saw obstacles. She saw claims against her throne. She saw arithmetic. Think about the price she was willing to pay. She wanted the crown so badly that she would buy it with the blood of her own descendants. The throne, priced in family, the seat of David, paid for with the children of David, her own children's children. There is a kind of hunger that will eat anything, even its own. And the book is showing us a woman in the grip of exactly that. Let that weight sit on you a second. Do not hurry off it. A grandmother doing this. And here is what I want you to feel underneath the horror. Every one of those children was a lamp that God had promised would not go out. Every small life was a piece of a promise older than the queen, older than her father's house, older than Baal himself. She thought she was clearing away rivals. What she was really doing, what she believed she was doing, was reaching up to put out the flame of God's own word. I sat with that a long time before I ever told this story out loud. A woman convinced she could kill a promise, as if a promise were a child you could reach. So we have to ask the hard question. How? How does a grandmother do this? Most folks, when they hear this story, want to make her a monster, something not human, so they do not have to look too close. But I have come to believe the truer answer is more frightening than a monster. She was human. She was Jezebel's daughter, raised to believe that power was the only thing worth having and the only thing worth trusting. Her mother served a god of wood and fear. Athaliah served an even smaller one. She served the throne itself. The crown was her Baal, and a person will do to keep their God what they would never do for anything less. Here is my read of it, for whatever it is worth. I spent a lot of years thinking cruelty like this comes from hate. Out in the workshop one evening, sanding down a joint, this story caught me sideways and I set the block down. Because it is not hate that makes a grandmother count her grandbabies. It is fear. Fear of losing the one thing you have made your whole self out of. My grandmother used to say on that Georgia porch that the devil does not usually come as a roar. He comes as a person too scared to let go. I did not understand her when I was young. I understand her now. Athaliah was terrified of a world where she was not on top. And terror in a powerful hand kills more people than anger ever has. That is what fear of losing control does to a soul. It shrinks it. It turns living children into threats, and love into arithmetic, and a grandmother into a hand that signs a death warrant. She had spent her whole life gripping the throne behind her husband, gripping it behind her son, and now, with every man gone, gripping it in her own two fists so hard she would crush anyone she had to. The book does not need to explain her to us. It just needs to show her. And what it shows is a woman who has served power so long she cannot imagine surviving without it. And so, when the killing was done, it looked finished. Sit with how final it looked. The seed royal, destroyed. The heirs of David, gone. The promise God made to David, that a son of his line would always sit on the throne, looked, that night, like a candle. Somebody had licked their fingers and pinched out. Dark. Done. Over. Anyone standing in Jerusalem the next morning would have told you the line of David had ended in a single night at the hands of one of its own. The lamp was about to go dark. That is genuinely how it stood. Centuries of promise, from Abraham down through David, all narrowing to this one black night, and it seemed the whole thing had failed. The old writers let it look that way on purpose. They want you to stand in the dark with everybody else and believe the light is out. But you and I know something the Queen did not know. She had counted carefully. She was a woman who did not leave loose ends, who had spent a lifetime making sure of things. And still, she had not counted everyone. Somewhere in the city that night, behind a door she did not think to check, a promise was breathing. Small, hidden, alive, and a nurse was still running. Now let me take you back down that hall, because it is time you met the woman doing the running, or the one who sent her. Her name was Jehosheba, and the book gives her one of the bravest verses in all of Scripture, tucked in so quiet you could read right past it. 2 Kings chapter 11, verse 2. But Jehosheba, the daughter of King Joram, sister of Ahaziah, took Joash the son of Ahaziah and stole him from among the king's sons which were slain. Read that again in your mind. She stole him from among the king's sons which were slain. Do you see where she had to go to save that child? She had to go into the middle of the killing. She had to walk into the worst room in the palace and lift a living baby out from among the dead ones. I want you to see who she was, because it makes the courage sharper. Jehosheba was a princess, daughter of a king, sister to the dead king Ahaziah, which means she was, by blood, close kin to Athaliah's own house. And most tellings hold that she was the wife of Jehoiada, the priest. Think about that. A daughter of the palace, married into the temple, 1 foot in the house of the crown, 1 foot in the house of God. Of all the people in Jerusalem, she was the one soul positioned to reach into the palace and carry a child out into the sanctuary. I do not think that was an accident. When I sit with this story, that is the first place I feel the hand of God. Not in thunder, but in the quiet fact that the right person was standing in exactly the right doorway. And so, The picture from that very first night pays off right here. Remember the nurse running down the hall with a baby against her chest? This is where she was running to, and this is who sent her. The child was Joash, an infant, the last son of David's line, still breathing. And Jehosheba got him out, him and the woman nursing him, out of the reach of the counting queen, into the shadows where a grandmother's arithmetic could not follow. Where do you hide a king? You do not hide him in a fortress. You hide him in a bedroom. The book says Joash and his nurse were kept hidden in a bedchamber, a private inner room, away from Athaliah, so that he was not slain. Picture the smallness of it. Not an army protecting him. Not a wall, just a back room, a nurse, an aunt, and a door kept shut. The whole promise of God, hidden the way you would hide a secret you could not afford to have found. And here is the tenderest part of it, the part that gets me every time. That baby did not know. He did not know he was a king. He did not know a queen wanted him dead. He did not know that the promise God made to David was riding that night on whether he stayed quiet in a stranger's arms. He was just an infant, doing what infants do, while grown people held their breath over his cradle. The entire future of David's house, centuries of promise, resting in one small body that could not yet say a single word. That is how God so often keeps his word. Not with a shout, with a sleeping child nobody thought to look for. From that bedchamber, they moved him to the safest hiding place in the whole city, and it is almost too good a place to be true. 2 Kings, chapter 11, verse 3. And he was with her hid in the house of the Lord 6 years. The house of the Lord, the temple. The faithful kept the child of the promise inside the very house of the God who made the promise. 6 years, the boy grew up in the courts and back rooms of the temple, walking distance from the palace, breathing the same Jerusalem air as the woman who thought she had killed him. I have sat with the beauty of that a long time, and it still undoes me. The temple was not just a good hiding place because it had thick walls and quiet rooms. It was the right hiding place because of what it was. It was the house of the covenant. It was the place where the promise to David was remembered and sung. And that is exactly where the last heir of that promise was kept alive. The lamp that God swore would not go out, he kept it burning in his own house, in the dark, where no one thought to check. And here is the irony the old writers surely knew they were handing us. Athaliah had the throne. She sat on it. She wore the crown she had killed for. She ruled the city. But the one thing she had committed all that murder to secure, the death of every rival, the ending of David's line, that one thing she had failed to do, and the proof of her failure was growing up a few hundred steps from her own throne room. The heir was under her nose. She held the palace, and God held the child. She thought she had won. The whole time, the winning was hidden in the house next door. Now let me say the quiet thing this part is really about, because it is bigger than one king. This is a story about how God keeps a promise in the dark, not out loud, not with a sign in the sky. In the dark, behind a closed door, through the courage of a woman named Jehosheba, and a priest named Jehoiada, and a nurse whose name we never even learn. God did not stop Athaliah with fire from heaven. He stopped her with a bedroom, a temple, and a handful of faithful people who would not let the flame go out. I believe that is often exactly how he works. Slow, hidden, faithful. And I want to speak to somebody who needs to hear this. There are seasons when it feels like the killing has already happened, when it feels like whatever hope you were carrying got destroyed in the dark, and nobody even marked the loss. If that is where you are sitting tonight, hold on to this child in the temple, because the story is not over when the lamp looks dark. Sometimes the light is not gone. Sometimes the light is just hidden and being kept and waiting for its year to come. 6 years. That is what came next. 6 long years of a boy growing up in secret while a false crown sat on a stolen head. 6 years of silence, of waiting, of a promise held in trust behind temple walls. The queen thought the story had ended the night she counted, but the story had only gone quiet. And there is a difference, a world of difference, between a thing that is over and a thing that is only waiting. So for 6 years, Athaliah reigned. 2 Chronicles, chapter 22, verse 12, and 2 Kings echo it. She reigned over the land. Sit with how strange that sentence is. In all the long line of kings over Judah and Israel, she is the only woman who ever seized the throne and sat on it in her own name. Not queen beside a king. Not queen mother behind a king. Queen over the land, alone, the crown on her own head, one with the blood of her own house. She had reached the very top of the thing she had served her whole life, and she had reached it across a floor of dead children. And she did not sit there quietly. Everything we know of her says the years of her reign pushed Judah further down the road her mother had walked. The worship of Baal, the storm god of wood and stone, advanced in the city of David. Altars that did not belong went up. The house of the Lord was neglected, left to fall into disrepair while other gods got the attention. The north had finally fully come south. The very thing the promise to David was meant to guard against, a Jerusalem that forgot its God, was happening in broad daylight under a queen who had murdered her way to the throne to make it so. To everybody looking on, the story was over. That is what I want you to feel about those 6 years. There was no rebellion in the streets, no prophet standing in the square announcing a hidden king, just a kingdom settling, year by year, into the new normal. People got used to her. Children were born who had never known another ruler. The memory of the house of David dimmed like a lamp somebody had stopped tending. 6 years is long enough for a whole kingdom to forget what it lost and simply live with what it got. And a lie, given 6 quiet years, starts to feel like the truth. But God had not forgotten, and neither had a handful of people in the temple, because while the queen ruled the land, a boy was growing up in the shadow of the house of God. Come and see him, not on a throne, in the temple courts, an infant when he first came into hiding. But children do not stay infants. Year by year he grew, learning to crawl in back rooms, learning to walk in inner courts, learning to talk in whispers behind thick doors. A boy raised in a hiding place who could not run and play in the open like other children, because his very existence was a secret that men and women were risking their lives to keep. And the man raising him was the priest, Jehoiada. Picture this old priest and this hidden child, and you are looking at one of the tenderest pictures in the whole book. Jehoiada, husband of the brave Jehosheba, took that boy in and became a father to him. He taught him. He fed him the words of the covenant the queen was trying to bury. He told the child, "I have no doubt who he really was," quietly, carefully, when the boy was old enough to keep a secret that could get them all killed. Imagine being that boy. Imagine learning in whispers that the crown outside on the murderer's head was meant for you, that your father and your brothers and your whole family had been killed by the woman on the throne. That was the burden this child grew up carrying in secret. The way I hear it, that is a kind of fathering most of us will never be asked to do. Jehoiada was not just hiding a boy, he was raising a king in the dark, pouring the truth into him drop by drop, keeping a flame alive with nothing but patience and courage and the walls of God's own house. 6 years he did it. 6 years of watching the temple door. 6 years of teaching a child to be what a kingdom had forgotten it needed. And all the while, out in the city, the queen wore the crown and never once suspected that the real one was being made ready a few rooms away by an old man who would not quit. I want to stay in those 6 years a little longer because we are quick to rush past them to get to the good part, and the waiting is part of the story God is telling. Think about what 6 years of hiding cost the people keeping that secret. Every single day, for more than 2,000 days, Jehoiada and Jehosheba woke up knowing that one loose word, one careless servant, one child's cry at the wrong moment could end it all. 6 years of never relaxing. 6 years of guarding a truth so heavy it could crush them. That is not a dramatic night of courage. That is the harder kind, the courage that has to show up again tomorrow, and the day after, and the year after that. And this is the part I have to be honest with you about, because I have not always understood it. For most of my life, I told stories like this one. For the rescue, the big night, the crown, the shout. I would rush the waiting to get to the win, the way you skip the slow verses to reach the loud ones. Took me getting old, took me losing Della, my wife of more than 40 years, to understand why the waiting is the story. When Della passed, the world did not end in one dramatic scene. It ended in the quiet after. In the years of getting up in a house too quiet, doing the next small, faithful thing with nobody watching. And I learned something out there in that silence, sanding boards in the workshop with the radio off, that I could not have learned in the loud years. God does some of his best work in the waiting rooms, in the years nobody claps for. My grandmother used to say, the saddest stories are the ones told fastest, and I have come to believe the holiest ones are too. Jehoiada guarding that door for 6 years with no applause. That is faith, not the shout, the waiting before it. Because here is the truth the 6 years are teaching. God's clock is not our clock. He had promised David a lamp that would not go out, and he kept that promise. But he kept it on his own calendar, not ours. For 6 years it must have looked to any faithful soul in Judah like the promise had failed. And it had not failed. It was being kept in secret, growing up a little taller every year, waiting for a day that only God had circled. There is an appointed time. There is a 7th year for everything held in the dark. But you do not get to see it on the calendar. You only get to be faithful until it comes. And I know I am not just talking about a boy in a temple anymore. Let me speak plain to the one who needs it. You have waited on something in silence. You have kept a hope alive in a back room of your heart where nobody else could see it, wondering if the year would ever come, wondering if you had been forgotten. You have done the faithful thing over and over, with no crown in sight, no shout, no sign that any of it was working. I want you to hear the 6 years the way the faithful in Jerusalem eventually got to hear them. The silence was not absence. The silence was God, keeping something for a day you could not yet see. 6 years the queen wore the crown. 6 years the boy grew in the temple. 6 years the faithful watched the door and held their breath. And then the 7th year came. Everything that had been hidden was about to step into the light. Everything that had been silent was about to find its voice. The waiting was ending, and the day it ended is one of the great days in all the book. In the 7th year, Jehoiada moved. The old priest had waited long enough, and now he did the thing he had been getting ready to do for 6 silent years. 2 Kings, chapter 11, verse 4. And the 7th year Jehoiada sent and fetched the rulers over hundreds, with the captains and the guard, and brought them to him into the house of the Lord, and made a covenant with them. Read how careful that is. He did not rush into the street shouting. He sent, quietly, for the men who commanded the soldiers. He brought them into the temple, into the one place he controlled, and behind those doors he made a covenant with them. He bound them by oath. And then, the verse says, he showed them the king's son. Imagine that moment in the room. Hard men, captains of the guard, brought in on some secret errand, not knowing why, and an old priest steps aside and shows them a child, a boy of 7, and tells them the truth that has been hidden for 6 years. This is the son of Ahaziah. This is the blood of David. This is your true king, alive the whole time, while a murderer wore his crown. I have tried to picture their faces, the shock of it, the slow understanding of what they were being asked to risk, and then the oath, sworn quiet and deadly serious in the house of God. Now, here is a thing worth stopping on, because it surprises people. The man who saved the throne of David was not a general.
He was not a prince.
He was a priest. Most folks expect kingdoms to be rescued by warriors, by somebody with an army and a right to the crown. But the way I read it, God set this rescue on the shoulders of a priest and his wife, the keepers of the covenant, not the keepers of the sword. Jehoiada stepped that 7th year out of the quiet work of the temple and into the role of kingmaker. He organized it, he timed it, he risked his own neck to put the right head under the crown. And he did it not for power. He never took the throne himself, but for a promise. Then Jehoiada armed them and listened to where the weapons came from, because the book makes a point of it. He did not send out for new spears. 2 Kings, chapter 11, tells us the priest gave the captains King David's own spears and shields, the ones that were in the house of the Lord, David's weapons. The old king's own armory, kept in the temple all those years, now put into the hands of the men who would defend David's last living son. Do you feel the poetry of that? The weapons of the founder, taken up to save the line of the founder, the past reaching forward to guard the future. And he set them everywhere. The plan was tight, and it was smart. The verses walk you around the temple like a battle map. Guards posted at the doors, ranks of armed men from the right side of the house to the left side of the house, standing thick around the altar and around the boy, every man with his weapon in his hand. A living wall of soldiers, sworn by oath, ringing the child so that no one could break through to him. Nobody was going to get near that boy. Not a servant of the queen, not a soldier of Baal, not the counting hand of Athaliah herself. Picture it now, the whole scene loaded and ready. The temple courts, bright in the morning, and standing among the pillars a boy of 7, who has never once in his life stood in the open. Around him, a ring of armed men, tense, gripping the spears of a dead king. At the center, an old priest with something in his hands, and a crown waiting. 6 years of silence wound up tight as a bowstring, and every soul in that court knowing that the next few minutes would either restore the house of David or end it forever. Everything was in place, and Jehoiada gave the signal. And then they brought him out. 2 Kings, chapter 11, verse 12. And he brought forth the king's son, and put the crown upon him, and gave him the testimony. And they made him king, and anointed him. Slow down and watch it happen, because 6 years of silence break open right here in one sentence. Jehoiada brought the boy forward, out of the ring of soldiers, into the light of the temple court, and he put the crown on that small head. The crown of Judah, the crown of David, set on a child of 7 who could barely have understood the weight of what was being placed on him. Watch each thing the old priest does, because every piece of it is holy. He put the crown on him, the sign of the kingship. He gave him the testimony. Most read that as the book of the law, the covenant, placed in the boy's hands, so that everyone would know this king was bound to the word of God, not to the will of a tyrant. And he anointed him, poured the oil that marked a man as chosen, set apart, the Lord's own king, crowned, given the law, anointed. Everything the murderer on the throne was not, this child now was. And she did not even know it was happening. I have to sit with the picture of that boy a minute. 7 years old, raised in back rooms and whispers, told in secret who he was and what had been done to his family. And now, in a single morning, lifted out of hiding and crowned in front of armed men, oil running down his hair, a book of the law heavy in his small hands. He did not win a war. He did not fight for it. He was simply the one the queen had missed, kept alive by other people's courage, brought out at the appointed time. And that is the gospel of this whole story in one image. A survivor hidden by grace, crowned by faithfulness at the hour God had chosen. And this is the moment the lamp flares back to life. Remember the promise that David's lamp would not go out, that a son of his line would always sit on the throne. For 6 years that flame had been hidden in the dark of the temple, and any honest eye would have called it out. Now, in front of witnesses, with a crown and oil and the law, the flame stood up bright again. The promise had not failed. It had been waiting. And here it was, wearing a crown, a living answer to the woman who thought she had blown it out. I believe you cannot sit with this scene without feeling how patient God is and how sure He keeps His word. He just does not always keep it on the day we would have picked. And then the room could not hold it in any longer. The verse says, the people clapped their hands and shouted, "God save the King." Hear it. After 6 years of whispering, 6 years of keeping the great secret, 6 years of not daring to say the true King's name, the doors of silence blew off their hinges. Hands clapping, voices rising, "God save the King, God save the King." The words a whole city had been forbidden to say roared out loud at last in the courts of the temple. They blew the trumpets. The book puts the trumpet blast right there in the middle of it, and you can almost hear it split the morning. The sharp, bright, unmistakable sound that means a king has been made. Not a quiet sound, not a careful sound. The loudest, most public sound in the ancient world, ringing out over the temple walls and down into the streets of Jerusalem. 6 years of silence answered in one blast of brass and one roar of human voices. And that is the thing about the shout. It could not be kept in the temple. It rolled out over the walls and down into the city, and people looked up, and people started to run toward the house of God to see what on earth was happening. The whole city was about to learn in a matter of minutes what the queen in her palace did not yet know, that the counting had failed, that an heir was alive, that there was a new head under the crown of David. The secret was a secret no longer, and the sound of it was traveling, right that moment, straight toward the one person in Jerusalem who most needed to hear it, and least wanted to. In the palace, the queen heard the noise. 2 Kings chapter 11, verse 13. And when Athaliah heard the noise of the guard and of the people, she came to the people into the temple of the Lord. Picture her lifting her head at the sound. 6 years she had sat on that throne, and never once had she heard a sound like this. Trumpets, shouting, a whole crowd roaring something toward the house of God. And something in her, I imagine, went cold before she even knew the words. The old instinct of a woman who had spent her life listening for threats. She rose from her stolen throne, and she went toward the noise, toward the temple, to see what was being taken from her, and walk with her, because the road she walks in that verse is the road of her whole undoing. She had counted once, in the quiet of a night, sure she had accounted for every rival. Now the arithmetic was coming back around on her. The queen who counted was about to be counted out. Every step she took toward that temple was a step toward the one thing she had killed to prevent: a living son of David, crowned with the people around him. She did not know that yet. She walked in like a ruler, expecting to put down a disturbance. She had no idea she was walking into the last minutes of her reign. Then she came through into the court, and she saw him. And, oh, the reversal she never saw coming. There, in the temple she had let fall into neglect, stood a boy wearing the crown of Judah. The book paints the picture with an old and formal phrase: the king stood by a pillar, as the manner was, in the place where kings were presented, with the captains and the trumpeters beside him, and the people rejoicing and blowing trumpets. A coronation. A finished, public, celebrated coronation. Everything she had murdered, her own grandchildren to make impossible, standing right in front of her, done. And here is what she did. Verse 14. Athaliah rent her clothes and cried, "Treason, treason." She tore her robe, the old sign of grief and horror and outrage, and she screamed one word twice. Treason, treason. Stop and really hear that word coming out of her mouth, because it may be the most astonishing single word in the whole story. Treason means the betrayal of the rightful ruler. Treason means someone has risen up against the one who truly belongs on the throne. Do you feel the terrible irony of it? This woman standing there, she was the traitor. She was the one who had risen up against the rightful line. She was the one who had murdered the true heirs and stolen a throne that was never hers. And now, faced with the real king, the actual blood of David crowned before her eyes, the only word she can find is the very crime she herself committed. She calls justice a betrayal. She looks straight at the rightful king and screams the name of her own sin. I have come to believe that is what wickedness does when it is finally cornered. It does not repent. It accuses. It looks at the truth arriving and calls the truth a crime. There is a kind of justice in that scene, so exact it can only be God's. The counting queen undone by the one she failed to count. The murderer of the seed royal, brought down by the single seed that survived. The woman who tore a whole family apart, standing in the temple, tearing her own robe. She had authored a night of blood to keep this exact morning from ever coming. And here it was anyway, in the house of the God she had ignored, crowned and anointed and cheered. She screamed treason at the top of her voice, but the treason had been hers all along, and her time was up. Jehoiada did not let the moment turn into a slaughter in the house of God, and that tells you something about the man. 2 Kings, chapter 11, verse 15. The old priest commands the captains, "Take her out from the temple, and let her not be slain in the house of the Lord." He would not have blood spilled in the sanctuary, not even hers. So they laid hands on her, and they led her out. Verse 16, And they made way for her by the way by the which the horses came into the king's house, and there was she slain. At the horse gate, on the road the horses used, away from the holy ground, the reign of Athaliah ended. I am going to tell that plainly, and then leave it, the way the book does. She was taken out, and she was killed. The old writers do not linger over it. They do not describe it. They do not cheer. And I am not going to cheer either, because I do not think we are meant to. There is no victory dance over her body in the text. There is just the quiet closing of a terrible account. The woman who counted her grandchildren for the throne was led out by the horse gate and put to death. And the long nightmare she had brought into the house of David was over. We can be glad the killing stopped without making a show of the killer's end. May God be the judge of her soul. That was never our job. But understand what her death broke. When Athaliah fell at the horse gate, the grip of the house of Ahab on the throne of Judah broke with her. For a generation, the poison her mother Jezebel had brewed in the north had run through the veins of the south. It came in through a marriage, it grew through a son, and it seized the throne through a grandmother's blade. And now, at last, it was cut off. The daughter of Ahab was gone. The line she had tried to destroy was on the throne. The long, slow disaster that began at a wedding ended at a gate, and then Jehoiada did the thing that mattered even more than removing the queen. He rebuilt what she had torn down, not the walls, the covenant. Verse 17, and Jehoiada made a covenant between the Lord and the king and the people, that they should be the Lord's people. Read that slowly. He gathered king and people together and bound them back to God. He did not just change who sat on the throne. He changed who the kingdom belonged to. The years of Baal were being undone, not by force alone, but by a people turning back around and remembering whose they were. And they did not stop at words. Verse 18, the people went to the house of Baal, and they broke it down. They smashed his altars. They broke his images in pieces. And Mattan, the priest of Baal, they slew before the altars. Everything the queen had built up over 6 years to honor a god of wood and stone, the people pulled down in a day. The storm god her mother carried south, and she nursed in the city of David, was thrown out of Jerusalem. The house that had been given over to Baal was given back to the Lord. And then, the book says, the city was quiet. Verse 20, and all the people of the land rejoiced, and the city was in quiet. Sit with that last word, quiet, not the false quiet of 6 years under a tyrant, when a whole kingdom held its breath and forgot its God. A true quiet, the quiet of a throne set right, a covenant renewed, a boy king on the seat of David, and a people back in the hands of the God who made them. The lamp was burning again, out in the open now, where everyone could see it. And a little 7-year-old boy named Joash sat on the throne his grandmother had emptied. The promise had held. So now you know the part the story was holding back. Here is what the whole thing was really about. From that first cold night to the quiet in the city, the crown was never hers to end. Athaliah thought a throne was something you could seize with a knife and keep with fear. She thought a promise was a thing you could kill, like a child, if you were only thorough enough. And she was thorough. She counted, and she killed, and she reigned, and she was certain the line of David had died in her hands. She was wrong, because the promise of God was never resting on her arithmetic. It was resting on him. And let me speak to you now, plain, the way my grandmother would have on that Georgia porch with the night coming on. The whole story comes down to the one she missed. One child, hidden in the dark, kept by faithful hands, while the powerful counted their winnings, and the whole world called the light gone out. I have carried this story a long time, and here is where I have landed. Whatever you are grieving tonight, whatever hope you think got destroyed in some back room where nobody even marked the loss, do not be so sure the lamp is out. Sometimes the light is not gone. Sometimes the light is just hidden, being kept, waiting on a seventh year only God has circled. She counted everyone but the one that mattered. He usually does keep the one that matters. That is the good news buried in a story that opens so dark. The seed she missed carried the whole promise. Everything that came after, the kings of Judah, the long road down the centuries, all of it, ran through one baby. A nurse carried down a hall while a queen did her counting. God kept his word with a hidden child and a handful of brave, unfamous people. He does not need the throne room to keep a promise. He can do it with a bedroom, a temple, and a woman named Jehosheba, whose courage most folks never learned to say out loud. Now, let me be honest with you about what I have done here tonight. Scripture invites us into the story, and what you saw today is one telling of it. Mine, the way I have heard it and carried it and come to love it. The text is deeper than any retelling can capture. This is not a prophecy, and it is not the final word. It is one storyteller's reading, and yours may run a little different, and that is all right. Go and sit with the 11th chapter of 2 Kings yourself. Read it slow. There is more in it than I could give you, and there always will be. That is the beauty of the old book. It never runs dry. If this story stayed with you, do something for me. Down in the comments, tell me the story you want told next. The name, the night, the one you have always wondered about. And if this one moved you, leave me one word so I know it landed. Leave me the word remembered, because that is what we did here tonight. We remembered a child the world nearly forgot, and the faithful few who kept him. And if you want to be here when I tell the next one, come walk with me, subscribe, and stay close, because there are more of these than I will ever get to, and the next telling is already waiting. Let me pray us out. Father, we thank you for a promise that no knife could kill and no queen could end. We thank you for the hidden ones, the waiting ones, the faithful who guard a flame in the dark with no applause. For everyone listening who is sitting in a long silence tonight, wondering if their year will ever come, remind them of a child in the temple and a seventh year that came right on time. Keep their lamp burning. Give them the patience of Jehoiada and the courage of Jehosheba, and bring them in your own time into the quiet after the storm. We ask it with hope, and we trust you with the timing. Amen. Now go on and walk in that truth. The light was never as gone as it looked. One last thing before you go. This is how I read Scripture, not a prophetic word. I quote from the King James Version, unless I say otherwise. If you read it differently, I want to hear it. Drop your thought in the comments.